Hello poker enthusiasts, today we're exploring the nuances of transitioning to a more loose aggressive style of poker and if it's even worth it. First of all, what is loose aggressive play? It's a dynamic and assertive strategy that involves playing a wide range of hands and betting very aggressively. The key is to put constant pressure on your opponents to keep them on their toes and to capitalize on the mistakes that they make. Unlike tags, so tight aggressive players, these loose aggressive players, the lags, are not afraid of getting involved in loads of pots and thus being unpredictable all the time. Most of the best players in the world are lags. It's that sexy upward going red line in Poker Tracker 4 that so many poker players strive for. Tags make money, but good lags make a lot more money. But this style is not for everyone. You need to be fundamentally very strong in order to implement such a lag style successfully. Otherwise, you will be eaten alive at the poker table. And there's no merit in having an upward red line, but being an overall loser, like this player here. There are two things that we have to understand about a lag style, and both of them are actually negative. First of all, it increases variance. We will win bigger pots, but we will also lose bigger pots. So the ups and downs are much bigger than they are anyway. And humans are not very good at accepting this type of variance, but we will have to embrace this variance as a lag player. And the second aspect is that we will pay more rake. Especially at the lower stakes, whether that's live or online, this is a major factor that a lot of players do not consider. So if we want to play a more loose aggressive style, we will have to make up for the higher rake and we have to win even more in order to compensate for this higher rake. So here's an example. Let's say we play 1-2 live and we make $10 an hour after rake and we pay $10 in rake every hour that we play, on average of course. So that means that if we didn't pay any rake, we would make $20 an hour. That's our win rate before the rake. If we now play a looser style and we pay $20 an hour in rake instead of the $10 that we played previously, it means that now if we want to still have a win rate of $10, we have to actually win $30 before paying the rake just to have the same win rate as we did before. So in order for this lag style to be profitable, we have to make more than $30 an hour pre-rake so that it's worthwhile. Otherwise, we can stick to the lower variance tag style and it's even better because we don't have to pay that much rake and we decrease variance compared to the lag style. Well, you're not watching this video to remain a tag, so what can you do in order to move to transition towards being a lag? Well, start on the button. This is key. You are guaranteed to have position post-flop on every street, so this is where you can start increasing your aggression. I wouldn't deviate too much from GTO though, so I wouldn't 3-bet an early position raise with a hand like Jack-7 suited or Ace-4 offsuit. Instead, look at hands that are mixes in GTO and just move the frequency over in favor of the more aggressive action. For example, pocket sevens on the button mix between calling and raising against a low jack open. They call 77% of the time and they raise 23% of the time. A lag will change that mix to, say, 10% calling and 90% raising. Even pocket deuces raise 8.8% of the time in this spot, so you can start using that hand as a 3-bet hand a bit more often. And let's be honest, how often do you 3-bet pocket deuces on the button? My guess is that the number is very, very low, if you even do it at all. You can also expand your 3-betting range to include hands like King-8 suited or Ace-10 offsuit. These hands are mostly folds, but they can 3-bet at equilibrium. Once you're comfortable with these 3-bets, you can expand your 3-betting range in the cutoff as well. But one thing is very important. Don't start playing very loose in early positions. Being a profitable lag doesn't mean playing all sorts of hands from any position. And this is also true for post-flop play. You can apply much more pressure if you have position after the flop. Okay, so the next step is to 4-bet light more often, but make sure to use the correct hand class for that. You want to have blockers on your side, so an ace or a king in your hand. Don't just go ahead and 4-bet blindly with queen jack suited, but use bluff hands like ace jack offsuit on the button against a big blind 3-bet, or king 10 suited in the low jack against a small blind 3-bet. One word of caution though, only ever 4-bet light against regs or very loose recreational players. If a passive recreational player 4-bets for the first time after like 3 or 4 hours, you will be burning money if you 4-bet him with something like ace-jack offsuit. You are most likely facing a range that consists exclusively of aces and kings. Here are a few ways to play more loose aggressively post-flop. Number 1. C-bet a little bit more than feels natural. Now, I'm not trying to tell you to C-bet just everything without even thinking about it, even if it's a bad board for your range, but against a few opponents you can actually get away with it. Because believe it or not, but even in 2024, people tend to overfold to C-bets. So that doesn't mean that you will win every single time you will C-bet, of course, but if you can get those little edges, 1% here, 2% there, that will add to your win rate. So if you raise the button and the big blind calls and the flop comes 9-4 deuce rainbow, just C-bet big on that board with pretty much your entire range. If he has a hand like queen 10 offsuit or 7-5 suited in this example, there is not that much that he can do with those hands. Not many players have the guts to fire a check raise against an aggressive player. They are afraid that you might play back, especially if your C-bet is quite big. Number 2, play your draws more aggressively. So many players just check call with a flush draw or a gut shot. Loose aggressive players, however, always try to find ways to increase the aggression in their game, and they do that with check raises that might not even look like check raises to you. And this brings us to point number 3, check raise light. There are 4 factors to look out for, and if you have at least 3 of them in a hand, just try to find some creative, unnatural looking bluffs. The 4 factors in no particular order are: A. Villain's C-bet size is small. B. You have at least 1 overcard. C. You have a backdoor flush draw. D. You have a backdoor straight draw. Here's an example. The button raises and you have king 5 suited in the big blind and you call. Flop comes 7 of hearts, 6 of spades, deuce of diamond. He C-bets 1/3 pot. So the C-bet is small. You have an overcard. You have a backdoor flush draw. And you have a backdoor straight draw. This is the perfect hand for a light check raise. Number 4, barrel scare cards. This is even backed by GTO, but many players do not find these bluffs. For example, you 3-bet ace-10 offsuit on the button against a low jack open and you get called. The flop comes 9-4 deuce rainbow. You C-bet big and get called. Now the turn is a king. He should not have floated against a big C-bet with many king X hands, whereas you have many kings in your range. Ace king, king queen, even offsuit, king jack offsuit, king 10 suited. If you are deep stacked, you can even overbet in this spot. The low jack will be in a miserable spot with a hand like pocket 7s or pocket 8s, or even pocket jacks and pocket queens. And as a general point, use your image to get big value with your non-nutted hands. If you keep raising and re-raising and your bluffs get caught, you're in a great position to go for big value. Here's an example. In the last 10 minutes, you 3-bet a guy 3 times in a row, and now you can see that he's getting really frustrated. Now he raises in the low jack and you have pocket jacks in the high jack and you 3-bet him once again. This time he has had enough of you. He puts in that 4-bet, and normally with these stack depths and in these early positions, the solver mixes between a call and a fold here. But with this specific dynamic, you can just shove here. You might get called by something like pocket 10s, pocket 9s, even a hand like ace 10, and of course ace king, ace queen, but you're okay against those hands. You're actually okay against the calling range, plus you might fold out some hands that have good equity against you if he decides to fold a hand like ace 10 or even ace queen. And sometimes, by the way, he will have aces in that spot, and that's what I meant by higher variance. You just have to embrace it. This spot, it happened to me exactly like this in a live game recently, but hey, what can you do? I still think it was a good decision to go for it there, but he did wake up with aces in this spot. Tough luck. And here's a post-flop example of this play. You raise ace 10 on the button, the big blind calls. The flop is 10-7 deuce rainbow, you overbet, he calls. The turn is a king, you can now bet big again. It's unlikely that he called the overbet with a king. If you have a bluffy image, he can easily call with a weaker 10 or a 7 or something like pocket 8s and pocket 6s. If you just start out and you try to implement a more loose, aggressive playing style, be careful not to fall into the trap of actually playing a loose, passive style instead of a loose, aggressive one. I certainly made that mistake in the old days when I first started trying to be a bit looser. I had heard about Daniel Negreanu and playing the small ball style, so I decided to go ahead and flat hands like Jack-9 suited on the button against an under-the-gun raise. I thought I had position and I had a skill edge, so I just called there. But if you do that, you risk getting squeezed by the blinds, or you make it post-flop, but then the flop is not favorable and you often have to fold. With all that said, the question is now, should you even aspire to play a lag style? Well, honestly, for the majority of players, I think the answer is no. Unless you absolutely crush the game, I would not recommend it. It can even be dangerous to play a lag style. You constantly play for bigger pots, you never really know where you are in a hand, you pay higher rake, and the higher variance might mess with your head. Especially in live poker, where almost everybody plays a way too loose style, I would just stick to playing tight aggressively. I remember a few years ago when I played 1-2 deep stack games, I tried to loosen up, I tried to be very aggressive, going there with the big bluffs on the river and so on, and I just found that my win rate just dropped after that. Now, the sample size wasn't huge, so it might have just been bad variance, but I think it was still the case that I didn't fare that well with this style. Once I switched back to a more tag approach, my win rate started increasing again. I would advise to learn playing a good solid tag style backed by game theory optimal GTO. Of course you can and you should play the player, you should try to exploit everyone at the table as much as you can, but the default should always be the GTO strategy, and you can deviate from that depending on what your opponents do wrong. And once you are really comfortable and confident with your play and you can back it up with a massive win rate, then you can start thinking about opening up your range and being a bit looser and a bit more aggressive even than before. But until then, stick to fundamentally strong poker. And if you want to know how that goes, this video here might help you with that.